Welcome back, Revive. It's good to be with you. We apologize for our technical difficulties this morning, but we're excited to be able to record this and go ahead and share this with you. So, no further to do. The band's going to lead us in the song Redeemed.
Good morning, church. As you can see, I'm coming to you from a different location than everyone else. I've taken this opportunity to come and visit some friends and family in the Mayfield area. So that's one of the ways I've actually been blessed, that I found a blessing in all of the hard things that we're going through, is to be able to have the freedom to do my work online and to come and visit family in person, and then to be with you and through video and in spirit, and bring to you a sermon, a lesson this morning, coming from the book of John. Now, if you've been following along with us for the last 2 weeks, we're in a series from the Gospel of John that we're calling Truth and Dare. We're going into the book of John. We're going into God's Word and mining for truth, but we're not just going to accept that truth, right? Like where it's different from the game of truth or dare. We're doing truth and dare. I'm going to choose to take on the truth and the dare that comes along with it. Now, if I believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that Jesus was God in the flesh, that He's the light coming into the world, then there is a dare. There is a dare that I have to take. Now, once I accept that truth, there's something I've got to do with that truth. I've got to ask God to allow the light to come on in my heart. I've got to ask God to bring forth my rebirth. I've got to ask God to tell me the truth about me and to help me to remove strongholds and blockades where I block light out from my own heart. So keeping those truths in mind, the original plan was to go from John chapter 3 back to John chapter 2. And there's a very specific reason I wanted to do that. And I even brought that up in last week's sermon. But there was a reason. I just found myself unable to settle on what exactly it was God was wanting me to, what truth God was wanting me to find, and then what dare God was wanting me to extend, what challenge He was wanting me to extend from that. And I just couldn't settle on it. But now that I see the tragic events that happened in Minneapolis, and the tragic responses, and the hatred, and all of the ugly things that are coming from that, I can see very clearly now that God's plan was for me to move on to John chapter 4 and talk about the woman at the well, the woman of Samaria at the well. Now, there's some very important things to understand, if you don't already, about Jews, Gentiles, and Samaritans. Okay, the Jews were God's, from the Old Testament, the Jews were God's elect people. And it wasn't really so much of a race-based or culturally based thing as it was of just a belief kind of thing. So the word Gentile was simply a word that they used for anybody who was not Jewish. Right? There were the Jews, and anybody who was not a Jew was a Gentile. But now you have a group of people who had gone from the Jews, all right, and married Gentiles, and then had children. Right? So they'd, in their minds, had literally and figuratively slept with the enemy. Right? And so there's where the Samaritans came from. The Samaritans neither belonged to the group of the Jews, nor did they belong to the group of the Gentiles. They were Samaritans. They were something different. They were something actually despised by both groups. And what a difficult position to be in. Just like if you are someone right now in our culture who, with everything that's going on, and you have you're born of a mixed couple. Right? If your mother or your father was black, and the other parent was white, and you see what's going on in this culture, and you're being told what to think and how you should feel and what you should do, and you just really don't feel like you belong or fit in anywhere. I mean, this is the story for you. This is the story for you. This is what Samaritans were. Right? So Jesus, starting in verse 1, chapter 4, it says, "Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus had made more disciples than John," though Jesus himself didn't baptize anyone but his disciples, "he left Judea and departed again to Galilee." You see, the Pharisees are thinking, hey, Jesus' group is doing better than our group. And Jesus had to go do something about that. "He left Judea and departed again to Galilee, but on the way, he needed to go through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near the plot of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph." This is something the scripture is saying, hey, this is the line of Abraham. This was something that was given, and this is something that was done at that time, was done for the Jewish people. "Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied from his journey, sat thus by the well, and it was about the 6th hour. And then a woman of Samaria came to draw water. And Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink,' for his disciples had gone away to the city to buy food." Right? By law and by their own prejudices even, they would not have bought food in Samaria. Right? They would have considered it to be unclean. "The woman of Samaria said to him, 'How is it that you, being a Jew, ask a drink from me, a Samaritan woman?' For the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Right? So right here, I think the number one truth that we need to stop and to grasp, not number one in rank, but just the first thing that comes up, is that someone's individual identity is paramount to the group identity. Who they are individually is far more important than they are as a group. And this is one of the traps we fall in. So if we were going to conquer racism in our own heart, in our own churches, in our own societies, in our own cultures, the first thing we have got to do is to recognize that the individual identity is paramount, is more important than the group identity. That's not to say that the group identity is not important, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But who this woman was individually was way more important to Jesus than who she was as a group, right? Who she was specifically was way more important to Jesus than her being a Samaritan. And Jesus answered and said to her, if you knew the gift of God and who it was that says to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. Jesus tells us, the word tells us that we're to judge people by what's in the heart, that God looks at the heart. He doesn't look at the outward appearance. And Jesus is saying, like, look, listen, you're looking at me and you're seeing a Jewish person. But if you really knew, if you got to know me, if you will sit down and meet with me at this well, and you will let me speak truth into your life, if you really knew who I was, and I asked you for a drink of water, you wouldn't be thinking about politics. You wouldn't be thinking about what racial group or what cultural group I'm from and how that plays into this, right? If you really knew who I was, you would have asked me to give you, right? You would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. And the woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? Our father, right? Are you somebody that's greater than the leader of our group, who gave us this well and drank from it himself, as well as his sons and his livestock? Right? Because she believed that, hey, we're the rightful owners of this well, that Jacob was indeed our father and not your father. Right? She's basically saying, hey, God did this for my group. He didn't do it for your group. You know? But Jesus answered and said to her, whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. Now, you're thinking in terms of your flesh. You're thinking in all the wrong ways here. Right? But whoever drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I shall give him will never thirst. But the water that I shall give him will become in him a fountain of water springing up to everlasting life. Right? It will be the fountain of youth. Right? It will be the water that was in the Garden of Eden, the water that is going to be in heaven, the water that is in heaven, that's going to be in the new heavens and the new earth. Right? So she was blinded. And she was blinded not simply because of this, but because of her group identity thinking. She wasn't thinking about, who is this individual? Who is this person in front of me? Am I willing to put aside my preconceived notions of who this person is based off of what group they're a part of and get to know them and get to know him? Because if she had missed that opportunity, she would have realized that I'm sitting in front of the author of life in the flesh. Jesus, so his answer to her is brilliant. And he's completely ignoring this theological, this political debate that she's trying to draw him into. Who's this well belong to? You know? And so one of the important things I think we can see here is that, this woman is like, Jacob was our father. This well was made for us. But what really happens here, if we really look at the story, and Jesus is going to go on to acknowledge it, but the well, when it was built, had a specific purpose for that specific time. It was built for a specific reason, and this woman is disagreeing with Jesus on why. But the most important thing, the most important function, like God, when he had that well created, when that well was made there, right, he could see, he knew this moment in time was coming. Like right now, the most important thing about this well is for me to be able to sit here at it with you and use it as an illustration to help you to believe that there is everlasting life, not only for the Jew, but the Gentile and the Samaritan. That God cares enough about you individually, regardless of what nation or race or creed that you're a part of, that he is willing to offer you this living water. There's a time in Matthew when Jesus is going to send out the disciples, and he tells them, hey, don't go to the Gentiles and don't go to Samaria, but just go to the lost sheep of the tribe of Israel. And you read that and you wonder, well, does Jesus not care about them? But when we read this story in John, we see that it's very important that Jesus, hey, I need to go first, and I need to go sit with this woman at the well, and I need to share with you an example of how we need to go in, with what mind we need to go in, and with what heart we need to go in and love on and care for and minister and to share the gospel with these Samaritan people. But she was absolutely blinded by that. The woman said to him, now she's becoming convinced, and the woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water that I may not thirst, nor come here to draw." Again, she's thinking about, she's thinking about her flesh, right? She's believing him, but she's not fully understanding yet. It's like, hey, well, cool. If there's water that I can drink of in one time, and I'm never thirsty, and I don't have to continue to make this long journey to this well. And there's a lot to be said about why this woman was out by herself and doing all of this work and carrying these heavy loads of water back and forth, and that she was coming alone. Jesus, perceiving this and thinking and forgetting about her group identity and coming to minister to her and how she was specifically hurt, how she was specifically broken, how she was specifically blind to God's truth, and how she had significantly sinned and fallen short of God's glory, right? Without thinking about what she needed to be healed from. But Jesus says to her, "Go call your husband and come here." And the woman answered and said, "I have no husband." And so not only does this woman have no group to belong to, right? She didn't belong to the Gentiles. She didn't belong to the Jewish people. Now she's revealing that, hey, I'm completely wrong. Jesus said, "You are well said that I have no husband. For you've had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. In that you spoke truly." And the woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem this place is where one ought to worship." See, my group says this, your group says this. I'm standing here with the Prince of Life, and I'm worried about what this group thinks. I'm worried about what they're doing, right? When I see someone that doesn't look like me, think like me doing something, I'm automatically saying, well, they think. And the minute I do that, I'm forgetting something. I'm forgetting about the Prince of Life. I'm forgetting about each individual person within that group that God absolutely loves, that he formed in their mother's womb, that he fearfully and wonderfully made, that he is pursuing, that he is loving, and that he cares about way more than I ever could. But she's trying again to draw him into this debate. Our father worshipped on this mountain, and you Jews say that in Jerusalem is the place where one ought to worship. So Jesus finally, she's been trying to draw him into this debate, and he finally, I don't know if it's giving in or what exactly his thoughts were, but he says, "Woman, believe me, the hour is coming when you will neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem worship the Father. You worship what you do not know, and we know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews." Now, this sounds a little bit harsh. It's saying, like this is for us and not for you. But he's pretty much saying, listen, if you want to go through the details, you want to go through the facts of what actually happened and what the truth about who descended from Jacob and where the well came from and where I came from is according to the flesh, listen, this is how it happened. You worship what you do not know. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. But the hour is coming, and now is, when true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and in truth, for the Father is seeking such to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. And the woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, who is called the Christ. When he comes, he will tell us all things." And Jesus says to her, "I who speak to you am he." Now, she is one of the very few people that he was willing to say, listen, you're waiting for this Messiah to come, and you are standing face to face with him right now. I am him. I am the Messiah. I am the one you are looking forward to. I am the Alpha and the Omega. I am the Son of God who is going to die for the sins of the world, right? And now that you have been willing to sit with me, and this is what God is calling us to do, is to sit with people so they can know who he is. Isn't that beautiful? Isn't that absolutely beautiful? Now, there are 2 truths that I think that if we're going to conquer racism in our own hearts, and we have to start there, if we're going to conquer hatred, racism, culturism, nationalism, that causes us to hate any group of people. Like we want to, right now, we're going to think about this on the basis of skin color, right? But it goes with any kind of group, right? Republicans, Democrats, gay people, whatever that is, right? We refuse sometimes. We want to assume something about them because they belong to a certain group, but we are unwilling to go sit at the well with them and to find out who they are, right? What their passions are, why they are where they are, to share with them living water, to share truth with them, to love on them, to minister to them. Okay? So the number one thing that we have to do if we're going to end this kind of thing, both in our hearts first and then in our cultures, number one is to realize that every single human being is a creation of God, fearfully and wonderfully knit together in the mother's womb, known by God before they were ever conceived. God had plans and a purpose for their life as well as it did mine. God sent his son to die for them just like he did for me. God is pursuing them to save them and to die for their sins and to save just like he wanted to save me. God has brought Jesus back from the dead and ascended him into heaven to build a mansion for them just like he built for me. And one day, I'm going to sit in heaven in my mansion in a neighborhood with people who come from different groups, who come from different races, who come from different tribes, who come from different cultures, right? And all of this ugliness is going to be gone. Now, when I say that the other truth is that God, that the individual identity is more important than the group identity, that doesn't mean the group identity is not important. That doesn't mean that God didn't create nations and didn't create races and didn't create people beautifully the way they are, right? And I am really one that's kind of, I don't like the idea or the term or the thought of being colorblind, right? That's kind of a silly thing to do. How about being color blessed? How about being someone who believes that, hey, well, God has made this unique spectrum of people and cultures and thoughts. And the only group that I want to be identified with is to being in God's group, to being on God's team, to having his mark upon my life. Right? And not to only be known that I am God's, but the scripture says, hey, they will know that we're Christians by our love. They will know that I sent you because of the way that we love one another and the way that we love them. And so I want to be known as God's, and I want to be known as God's by the way that I love and by the way that I care about people. That I'm not going to reduce them to their group identity, that I'm willing to sit down at the table no matter where you come from, no matter what you believe, no matter what color your skin is. I'm going to sit down at the table. I'm going to sit at the well with you, and I'm going to get to know you for you and to love you. If you ever want to come to me and ask me what I think about somebody of a certain group or political party or race or whatever, prepare yourself, because my answer is going to be this, and I don't want you to think I'm being rude, but my answer is going to be this. What do you think about X group of people? I'm going to reply to you like, I don't know. I don't know them all. And I'm committed to that way of thinking. It's a way of thinking that God has transformed me to, that I'm committed to, and I think it's important. So here is the truth, right? We've got the truth that God created each person, each life individually, uniquely, lovingly. He's created every life with intrinsic value that cannot be taken away by what other people think. It can't be taken away with the way that other people treat me and harass me, right? It can't be taken away from me. That is the truth. Now, I want to look forward in the book of Revelation, chapter 22, verses 1 through 5. And God said, he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding from the throne of God and from the Lamb. This is the water that Jesus was talking about that was going to come, right? This is the water that he had to offer that was better than the water in the well. In the middle of its street and on the other side of the river was the tree of life, which bore 12 fruits, each yielding its fruit every month. The leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Right? This could have said we're just for the healing of all people, right? Or just God's people. But God makes a distinction here, and he says it's the healing of all nations, all tribes, all tongues, they're all going to come. All of those who believe in God and believe in the name of his Son and who are born again, right, and have committed their lives to knowing and following him, no matter what they look like or what group they were identified with, they're going to come as nations with their own unique build, with their own unique qualities and attributes that God gave them, and come together to this tree for the healing of the nations. And his servants shall serve him, and they shall see his face. They will know him. They will know who it is that was speaking to them at the well. And his name shall be on their foreheads, right? And there shall be no light there, for they need no lamp nor light of the sun, for the Lord God gives them light, and they shall reign forever and ever and ever together. They shall see his face, and his name shall be on their foreheads. Now, that's why I say, hey, listen, God puts the individual. He cares about you. When you stand in judgment, it's going to be you and him. It's not going to be your group, whatever group it is you identify with, or set of groups you identify with. It's going to be you and him. And I'm not going to be able to say, well, yeah, God, I was a child of Abraham, or God, I was a white guy. I grew up in church, right? No, it's going to be me and God. I'm going to individually give an account for everything that I've said and done. And then the group that I'm identified with will be the mark that he puts on me that says, I am his. Isn't that beautiful? Forever and ever. And if this is not something that you desire, look, check your heart, man. Like, if you're not looking forward to a place where where people aren't thinking certain things about us because of the group that we're involved with, the color of our skin, then look at these scriptures. Look to heaven. Look at how Jesus ministered to people who were part of different groups than he was. So here's the truth. No, I've given you the truth. Now here's the dare. And I've made a post on Facebook, and I'm going to talk to Kevin about sharing that as our official church post. But it basically says this. I dare you to make a statement on your social media that says that you will not be told what to believe about people of different groups. I will not be told what to think about people of other races. I will not be told what to think of people of other colors. I will not be told what to think. Even people from other religions, people who are atheists, people who belong to the LGBT community, I will not be told. I won't be told what to think about them because I don't know them all. I won't be told. I'm going to let God tell me what to believe about each person individually. I will not be told what to think by the media. I won't be, and again, I hesitate to say media because I don't want to lump them, people who work for the media and do their jobs well. I don't want to lump everybody and assume the same things about all of them either. I will not be told what to think about anyone other than what God tells me to think. And what God tells me is that every person, no matter how they're broken or what group they identify with, is valuable, is loved by God, and that God has paid the ultimate price to redeem them to himself. Right? So put it out there. I refuse to believe anything about you. I will not be told what to think about you other than what God himself tells me. And this God tells me that you're valuable and that you are loved. And he sent his son to die for you just like he did for me. He's preparing a mansion. If you're willing to accept his love and his grace, he's preparing a mansion for you just like he's preparing it for me. And I look forward to that day where we don't have to deal with this anymore. The ugliness, the hatred, the anger in our own hearts and then with other people's hearts. That we can just celebrate and enjoy a life together in a new heavens and a new earth where this water that Jesus was talking about flows freely just like it did in the Garden of Eden. God bless you and have a good week.
Moving in our midst, I worship you. worship you. You are here, working in this place. I worship you. I worship you.